Hello guys, welcome to the final episode of Captured by a Mafia, Saved by Another. This is where everything comes together. Let's get right into it. Night draped soul in a velvet darkness as Ryu's sleek car glided up the winding driveway of his grandmother's estate. In the back seat, Ryu kept a steady hand on Shantel, his voice calm and reassuring. "Everything will be fine," he murmured, his eyes meeting hers briefly. He stepped out first, walking to her side and extending his hand. Shantel took it without hesitation, and he helped her gracefully out of the car. The butler, ever composed, welcomed them with a polite nod and guided them inside. As they entered the grand hall, every family member's eyes turned toward them. Jun, standing near the side, clenched her fists, a flash of anger crossing her face as her gaze landed on Shantel. At the head of the room, seated with quiet authority, was Ryu's grandmother. Her sharp eyes immediately fixed on the pair. Ryu guided Shantel forward, hand resting lightly on her back, as they approached his grandmother. The older woman's gaze was cold, assessing, almost piercing. Ryu bowed respectfully and gave his greeting, but his grandmother's expression did not soften. She did not respond, her silence carrying the weight of judgment. Shantel, sensing the chill in the air, held her head high, her composure unshaken as they awaited the next move. Lim Sunja's sharp eyes swept over Shantel before she spoke, her voice cutting like ice. "I did not know that my grandson would choose a broken woman, a woman who has been used by men." Ryu's jaw tightened, a flash of anger crossing his features. His parents exchanged glances, their displeasure evident, while other family members were stunned into silence. Jun's lips curled into a triumphant smile. She had been listening intently, and the words delighted her. Before anyone could speak, Ryu straightened, his voice firm and commanding. "I also didn't know that my grandmother had grown so old that she cannot think before she speaks." The hall went silent for a heartbeat. Then his parents exchanged satisfied, relieved glances, their approval of Ryu's words unmistakable. Other family members were visibly shocked. Jun's face twisted in fury, her plans unraveling before her eyes. She seethed silently, realizing that the path she had hoped to carve against Shantel had just been blocked by the grandson himself. Shantel, ever composed, simply smiled faintly, unshaken, while Ryu's steady hand on her back reassured her that they were united in this moment of defiance. Shantel lifted her chin slightly, her blind eyes glinting with calm defiance. Her voice was steady, carrying a subtle edge of steel. "I seriously don't care about my past anymore. And if anyone believes that my past can diminish me or our bond, they are mistaken. Also, I am not here to compete for approval. I am here because Ryu chose me. So far as his parents have accepted me, I don't care about others' opinions, including yours." Ryu's parents exchanged proud, approving glances, their relief evident. Even some of the other family members, still surprised, were smiling. This woman truly suited their nephew. Jun, however, seethed silently, her jaw clenched, her eyes dark with envy. She forced herself to maintain a polite facade, but the fire in her gaze was unmistakable. Then one of Ryu's cousins spoke. "Grandma, this is no longer your generation. If Ryu loves her, then it's settled. But what I want to know is, which woman do you think suits my cousin?" Lim Sunja looked toward Jun's side, and Ryu's cousin Chaiwon caught on. She spoke up sharply. "She's a schemer, and I don't like her. She gives me the vibe of green tea bitch." The other cousins nodded in agreement. Jun's face paled, fury simmering beneath the surface, but Chaiwon's disdainful gaze did not waver. Jun stood abruptly. "Chaiwon, take that statement back." Chaiwon looked at Jun with cool disdain, her tone dismissive as she sank back into her seat. Her parents, especially her father, gave a subtle but unmistakable thumbs up, signaling their full support. Ryu's parents stood and walked toward their son and his fiancée. His father turned to Lim Sunja first. "She's the perfect woman for my son, mother," he said firmly. Then, without hesitation, he turned to Jun. "You are no longer my daughter. I don't want to see you anywhere near my family." Shock and disbelief flashed across Jun's face. She had expected confrontation, but not outright disownment. Mr. Ryu bowed respectfully to his mother for the last time before motioning to his family to leave, leaving Jun standing in stunned silence, the weight of her failure pressing heavily upon her. Outside the mansion, Ryu gently squeezed Chantel's shoulder and whispered softly, "You handled that beautifully." Shantel only smiled, her expression calm and assured. Then Mr. Ryu spoke to his son, his tone firm yet warm. "You must marry her soon, before someone else does." Chantel's smile widened at his words, and Ryu let out a low chuckle. I would have married her tomorrow, he said, his voice darkening slightly. But the bastard who hurt her is still breathing. I have to get rid of him first. His father's expression hardened. If you need help, my men will be ready. Ryu nodded once in acknowledgement. His parents moved ahead, and moments later, Ryu and Chantel followed, leaving the mansion and its bitterness behind them. The following morning, Ryu calmly informed Chantel that he would be meeting his friend, and Choi Miho. Choi. Miho? Chantel repeated, surprise flickering across her face. Seek Jun has a brother? Ryu nodded. He does. They were never close. His jaw tightened slightly. Seek Jun framed him, destroyed his life. Miho wants revenge just as much as we want justice. Chantel fell silent for a moment before speaking softly. Be careful. Ryu leaned down, cupped her face gently, and pressed a reassuring kiss to her forehead. I will, he promised. I swear. With that, he left. When Ryu arrived at Eclipse, his private club, the building was already under tight security. One of his men approached him immediately. Boss, Lee Junho and Choi Miho are already waiting in the meeting room. Ryu nodded. Good. He headed straight to the private room. As soon as he stepped inside, Lee Junho leaned back in his chair, a teasing grin on his face. Looks like having your significant other around is making you late these days, Lee remarked lightly. Haesoo smirked as he settled into his seat. Love really is dangerous. Miho said nothing, offering only a faint smile as he quietly observed. Let's get straight to business. My men have gathered extensive evidence on Seek Jun, financial crimes, illegal arms funding, political assassinations. His voice was calm, lethal. Anyone who tried to erase or tamper with the evidence is already dead. The room fell into heavy silence. Haesoo turned to Miho. Your brother is truly filthy. Miho exhaled slowly, his face unreadable. I knew he was bad, he said evenly. Lee leaned forward. How did you end up behind bars in the first place? Miho's eyes darkened. 10 years ago, Seek Jun found out he was adopted. That truth broke something inside him. He finally understood why, no matter what he did, my parents never chose him. His fingers curled slowly into fists. To them, I was the heir. Seek Jun was just the assistant to the heir. Ryu's jaw clenched. That resentment consumed him, Miho continued. One night, he murdered our parents. Lee's eyes widened. And pinned it on you. Miho nodded. The weapon. The fingerprints. The motive. Everything was arranged perfectly. Silence followed, thick, suffocating. Miho finally lifted his gaze. So how do we deal with him? Ryu answered without hesitation. We destroy him legally first. We have more than enough evidence. Baek Min-woo will take this to court and make sure Choi Seek-jun never sees daylight again. Haesoo nodded. And if he resists? Ryu's eyes turned ice cold. Then we deal with that too. The three men exchanged knowing looks before nodding in agreement. While the meeting was still ongoing at Eclipse, chaos erupted at Ryu's mansion. Choi Seek-jun and his men arrived quietly, slipping past the outer perimeter like shadows, but the silence did not last. The moment they breached the compound, Ryu's men reacted instantly, returning fire, yet they were caught off guard by the sheer aggression and precision of the attack. Bullets tore through walls, bodies fell, and the once serene mansion was swallowed by violence. Seek Jun did not linger in the chaos. Thanks to Kai, he knew exactly where Chantel's room was. With two men flanking him, he moved swiftly through the corridors, stepping over shattered glass and fallen guards. His expression was calm, almost eager, as if this moment had lived in his mind for far too long. Inside her room, Chantel heard everything. The clash of metal, the sharp crack of gunfire, the shouts echoing through the halls. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. She opened the drawer beside her bed, retrieved her gun, and positioned herself against the wall, her breathing slow and controlled. She waited. The footsteps drew closer. Without warning, the door was kicked open. The first man barely had time to react before Chantel pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, clean and loud. He collapsed instantly, blood splattering across the doorway. Seek Jun and the remaining man leapt back, flattening themselves against the wall. Chantel's lips curved into a cold smile. That was disappointing, she said calmly. I expected more. Silence stretched. Why are you hiding? She continued, her voice mocking as it echoed down the hallway. Come out. Isn't it me you want? Then a soft chuckle cut through the tension. Little bird, Seek Jun said smoothly, his voice unmistakable. I really missed you. Shantel froze for a brief second. Her grip tightened around the gun. "So it's you, bastard," she said coldly. "Yep. It's me." Seek Jun's amusement was evident. "You've become fiery, spicy even. I like it. This means it won't be boring." As he spoke, he subtly signaled the man beside him. The man nodded and quietly pulled out his phone, stepping back to call for one of their men to bring the equipment containing the drug. Shantel caught the faint movement and scoffed. "Calling for help already?" she said coolly. "I thought you were braver than that." Seek Jun's smile widened, his eyes dark with obsession. "I'm just making sure this reunion lasts a little longer." Minutes later, another man arrived with the drug. Seek Jun ordered it prepared, drawn into a syringe and fitted into a syringe gun. Then he motioned toward Chantel's blind side. One of his men moved. Shantel fired instantly, the shot forcing him back, but in that split second, Seek Jun pulled the trigger. The dart struck Chantel's neck. Her body stiffened, the gun slipping from her fingers as darkness swallowed her whole. She collapsed to the floor. Seek Jun stepped inside the room, his boots echoing softly. He looked down at her unconscious form and smirked. His gaze caught on the ring on her finger. He snorted, pulled it off roughly, and tossed it aside. Then he bent down, lifted her into his arms, and turned away. There was no resistance. His men had successfully held Ryu's forces at bay. Back at Eclipse, the three men were nearing the end of their strategy meeting when the sharp crack of gunfire tore through the room. The sound echoed violently against the walls, shattering the calm in an instant. Lisa and her team had finally made their move, striking only after receiving Seek Jun's signal, after he had already taken what he wanted. The attack caught Ryu's remaining men completely off guard. Ryu's head snapped up, his instincts taking over before conscious thought could catch up. He crossed the room in long, purposeful strides and stopped before a concealed cabinet. With a quick press of a hidden latch, the panel slid open, revealing an arsenal neatly arranged inside. His movements were swift and precise as he grabbed two guns, handing one to Miho and the other to Lee. "Let's go," Ryu said, his voice low, controlled, and lethal. They moved out together, stepping straight into the chaos. Gunfire erupted around them, bullets tearing through walls and furniture, but the three men advanced without hesitation. Their movements were sharp and synchronized, every shot calculated, every target neutralized with brutal efficiency. One by one, Seek Jun's men fell, until the echo of gunfire slowly dissolved into an eerie, ringing silence. A cold realization settled heavily in Ryu's chest. This wasn't a random attack, it was a diversion. Before he could speak, one of his men came running down the hallway toward him, face pale, breath uneven. "Sir, it's the mansion," the man said urgently. "The attack, Choi personally led it." He swallowed hard before continuing. "And he took Shantel." The words hit like a blow. Ryu's jaw tightened, fury flashing through his darkened eyes. He slammed his fist into the wall, the impact cracking the surface and echoing through the corridor. The air grew heavy, silence pressing down as rage simmered just beneath his controlled exterior. Ryu turned sharply to the man. "I want the name of whoever leaked the mansion's location within 10 minutes, he said coldly. "By the time I get there, he should already be on his knees." The man nodded once and rushed off without another word. Without wasting another second, Ryu strode toward the tech room. Inside, three men worked feverishly, surrounded by glowing screens filled with maps, blinking signals, and streams of scrolling data. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. "Sir," one of Ryu's men spoke upon seeing him. "We can't track her." Seek Jun removed the ring from her finger. He hesitated. "The signal we're receiving, it's coming from her room." At those words, something in Ryu's chest sank painfully. For the first time since the chaos began, fear, cold, sharp, and merciless, slipped past his control. Back at Seek Jun's side, he sat beside Shantel in the back seat of the moving car, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity he had never shown before. His dark eyes traced every line of her face, lingering on her lips, her hands, the subtle tension coiled in her body, even in her restrained state. Every movement, every shallow breath she took seemed magnified in his focus. Minutes passed in heavy silence, broken only by her uneven, shallow breathing. Slowly, Shantel groaned. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing her blind eyes. Confusion, pain, and defiance swirled in her gaze, unbroken despite the haze clouding her senses. Seek Jun leaned closer, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "There she is," he murmured softly, his voice low, dangerous. "Little bird awake at last." Shantel turned her face toward him, her expression sharp despite the dizziness that lingered. Courage radiated from her. "You disgust me, Seek Jun," she said, her voice steady. He chuckled quietly, clearly amused. "Don't worry, little bird," he replied smoothly. "I've heard that several times." After a brief pause, she asked again, her tone wary but firm. "Where are you taking me?" Seek Jun's smile widened as he leaned back in his seat, eyes glinting with satisfaction. "Somewhere Ryu will never find you." Shantel said nothing more. She turned her head toward the window, her posture seeming resigned, almost defeated. What Seek Jun did not notice was the subtle movement of her hand as she pressed it lightly against the glass. With practiced precision, she activated a tiny concealed button on her right earring. The tracker came to life silently. It was a precaution she had taken long ago, a small device hidden at her request, placed by the butler after Ryu had gifted her the earrings. A quiet shield, one she had hoped she would never need. But now it was her only lifeline. Back at Eclipse, the tension in the room was suffocating. Lee was the first to break the silence. "My men have blocked every major road leading out of Seoul," he said firmly. Miho nodded in agreement. "Mine too. I've also deployed people across the city. They're actively searching for Seek Jun. He won't get far without being seen." Ryu listened without interrupting, his expression dark and razor-sharp. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Has that woman said anything yet?" Lee shook his head. "Nothing." Before Ryu could speak again, one of the tech men suddenly looked up from his screen, his eyes widening. "Boss," he said urgently, "we've picked up a signal. It's coming from the highway." The room went completely still. "It's from Madam," the tech added. Ryu moved instantly, command snapping into place. "Send the location to all units. Every single one of them." He turned sharply to the others, his voice cold and decisive. "Move out. Now." Back at Seek Jun's convoy, gunshots rang out, sharp and relentless. Seek Jun twisted in his seat, peering through the rear window just as one of his escort cars slammed sideways, flipping violently before skidding across the asphalt. Another vehicle was already engaged in a deadly exchange, bullets sparking off metal as it tried, and failed, to hold the pursuers back. "Speed up," Seek Jun barked coldly at the driver. The engine roared in response, the car surging forward. Seek Jun's gaze slid back to Shantel. She sat rigidly, her head turned toward the window, her face unreadable. "Was it you?" he asked quietly, suspicion tightening his voice. Shantel didn't answer. Seek Jun moved suddenly, reaching for her, but Shantel was faster. She drove her elbow hard into his ribs, twisting sharply in her seat, then grabbed his head and slammed it against the window. The glass shattered, shards scattering across the car. The vehicle swerved violently as one of the men in the front seat lunged at her. She met him with a punch, twisted his neck, and killed him instantly. Seek Jun then reacted. He tried grabbing her arm, but she wrenched free, slamming her head backward into his face. Bone cracked. Blood splattered across the seat. The driver glanced back for just a second, and that second proved fatal. A deafening horn blared. Out of nowhere, a massive truck barreled into the chaos, unable to stop in time. Metal collided with metal in a thunderous explosion. The car crumpled brutally, folded inward like paper, and was hurled to the side of the road near the river. The world went white. The impact threw Chantel's body forward violently. Pain tore through her as something impaled her chest, and then everything went dark. Seek Jun felt the snap of his spinal cord just before darkness swallowed him as well. Ryu's men, along with police and paramedics, had already arrived at the chaotic scene. Sirens blared and flashing red and blue lights streaked across the morning, reflecting off twisted metal and shattered glass. When Ryu's car pulled up and he saw the wreckage, his heart slammed against his chest. Without thinking, he bolted toward the mangled vehicle, screaming her name. "Shantel! Shantel!" His men lunged forward, grabbing him firmly. "Sir, wait!" Ryu shook them off, desperation blazing in his eyes. He pushed past again, ignoring their protests. His gaze swept over the scene, frantic, searching for any sign of her. The twisted car lay crumpled against the guardrail, smoke rising from the engine, glass shards glittering like cruel stars. Where is she?" he shouted, his voice raw with panic. A paramedic stepped forward, holding a stretcher carefully. "Sir, she's been removed, but she's in critical condition. We need to get her to the hospital now." Ryu's legs moved before his mind could catch up. He followed closely, urging them faster. His chest tightened as he pressed close to Shantel while she was lifted into the ambulance. Her face, pale and bloodied, still held a trace of defiance even in unconsciousness. He gripped her hand instinctively, as if his own strength could anchor her back to him. "Stay with me, Shantel," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're going to be fine." The ambulance doors closed, and Ryu pressed his forehead against the glass, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. The sirens wailed, carrying them toward the hospital, each pulse of sound echoing the fear, anger, and determination consuming him. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived at the hospital. The doors swung open, and nurses rushed forward, lifting Shantel onto a stretcher and moving with swift, practiced precision through the sterile, brightly lit corridors. She was in critical condition, her body frail from severe blood loss, every motion a delicate balance between life and death. Ryu ran alongside, his heart pounded wildly in his chest, each beat a frantic prayer. He watched helplessly as the surgical team wheeled her into the operating room. The sliding doors closed with a quiet thud, separating him from her for the first time since the crash. For a long moment, he stood frozen, staring at the doors, chest rising and falling under the weight of fear, tension, and a determination that burned hotter than ever. Minutes later, Miho and Lee arrived at the hospital, their expressions tense but composed. They already understood the gravity of the situation. Miho broke the silence first, his voice steady but edged with concern. "Seek Jun has also been rushed into surgery." Ryu's jaw tightened, his eyes dark with controlled fury. "He will not be spared for what he has done," he said, his voice low but unwavering. Lee nodded solemnly, hands clenched at his sides, silently echoing Ryu's resolve. Soon after, Ryu's parents arrived, their faces etched with worry. His mother stepped forward, voice trembling slightly as she asked, "What happened?" Ryu took a deep, steadying breath before recounting everything. The ambush, the crash, and Shantel's condition. His parents listened in stunned silence, the weight of the events pressing heavily on them, their hearts torn between fear and hope, each second stretching unbearably as they awaited news of her survival. That same morning, at Kang's mansion, one of his men stood before him, reporting everything that had unfolded. The attack, the crash, the hospital, and the tightening net closing in on Choi Seek Jun. With every word, Kang's expression darkened. Panic flickered in his eyes, subtle but unmistakable. If Seek Jun couldn't escape this time, neither could he. Their fates were too closely linked, their secrets too deeply entwined. Without hesitation, Kang turned sharply to his man. "Prepare my private jet," he ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "I'm leaving the country immediately." The man bowed and hurried off, leaving Kang standing alone. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him, a heavy, suffocating presence. For the first time, the walls of his mansion offered no protection, only the looming certainty that he might not escape the consequences of his own schemes. In the living room of her apartment, Hee-jin stood rigidly as she listened to the report from one of the servants at Ryu's parents' mansion. The news struck her like a bitter slap. Shantel was alive. She had survived the crash. Hee-jin tossed her phone on the ground after the call ended. Her fingers curled slowly into fists, her nails biting into her palms. To Hee-jin, Shantel should have died in that wreck. Fate, once again, had chosen to spare the woman she despised most. "Why does this woman have so much luck?" she muttered bitterly, pacing the room. Her lips twisted with contempt as another thought followed. And Seek Jun, he's truly stupid. Why would he personally join his men on such a mission? In her eyes, Seek Jun was nothing more than a reckless fool. Powerful, yes, but careless. And carelessness, she knew, was the fastest way to ruin everything. Back at the hospital, it was almost 1 p.m. when the doors to the operating room suddenly burst open. A nurse rushed out, her expression urgent and strained, not stopping as she moved briskly down the corridor. Ryu sprang to his feet instantly, his heart lurching painfully in his chest. Fear slammed into him so hard it stole his breath. He stepped forward, blocking her path. "What is it?" he demanded, his voice tight, barely controlled. "What's wrong with her?" The nurse did not stop. She didn't even look at him. "Move, please," she said sharply, her focus fixed ahead. "I need more blood units now." The words hit him like a blow. Lee moved closer, placing a steadying hand on Ryu's shoulder. Ryu's parents watched from a short distance away, his mother's hands clasped tightly together in prayer, her lips moving soundlessly, her eyes glossy with fear. Within minutes, the nurse returned, pushing a trolley stacked with blood units. Without another word to anyone, she disappeared back into the operating room, the doors swinging shut behind her with a heavy, final thud. Ryu remained standing where he was, staring at the closed doors as if sheer willpower could force them open. His fists were clenched, his entire body rigid with tension. "Please," he whispered under his breath, his voice cracking for the first time. "Don't leave me. Shantel." The hallway sank into an agonizing silence, broken only by the distant beeping of machines and the relentless pounding of Ryu's heart as he waited. Helpless, afraid, and praying that the woman he loved would survive. In the same hospital, in another surgery wing, Miho stood alone outside a different operating room. His posture was rigid, his hands clenched tightly at his sides, and his gaze was fixed on the red light above the door as if sheer willpower could force it to turn off. Unlike the chaos surrounding Shantel's case, this corridor was eerily quiet, amplifying every passing second. An hour dragged by in suffocating silence. Finally, the doors to the operating room opened, and the lead surgeon stepped out. He removed his surgical gloves slowly, his expression unreadable, but serious as his eyes settled on Miho. "Mr. Choi," the surgeon began calmly, "the surgery is over." Miho straightened immediately. "How is he?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. The surgeon held his gaze. "His condition is critical. He has a spinal cord injury and a traumatic brain injury. He is paralyzed and will not be able to move his arms or legs, and he cannot speak. Right now, our focus is keeping him alive and stable. Recovery, if any, will be long and uncertain." The words settled heavily in the air. Miho said nothing. His face remained impassive, but something dark flickered briefly in his eyes. Not pity, not relief, just cold acknowledgement. The surgeon continued, "He will regain consciousness within a few hours. After that, he'll be moved to recovery under strict supervision." Miho gave a single nod. "Thank you, doctor." As the surgeon walked away, Miho remained standing there, his thoughts distant and heavy. Fate, it seemed, had finally dealt Seek Jun a blow he could not escape. One that no money, power, or manipulation could undo.